My talk today is on New Thought. You see this slide? There's no way I'm going to teach this slide, so relax. I showed this to Kim yesterday, and she said they'll all be saying, take us back to meditation. So we're not going to do that. My talk today will be 18 minutes or less, and then we'll have time at the end for each of you to share. Because really, well, obviously I'm not a professional in religion. Well, maybe it's not obvious, but we all learn from each other so very much. So the point of my leaving time at the end is to learn from all of you. We've got all these great experts. That's you out there. We're going to do some New Thought history. I'm going to start with a story. As always, a fun little short story. There was show and tell in the 4th grade. And the first little boy showed up and said, "Good morning, my name is Ben, and I am Jewish, and this is the Star of David." The second boy showed up and said, "Good morning, my name is Mark, and I'm a Catholic, and this is a crucifix." The third boy showed up in front of the class and said, "Good morning, my name is Jeffrey, I am a Baptist, and this is a casserole." Yes. New thought is not so easy to identify. Now, at the end of my talk, I might mention what we might bring, but I had to think on that. So what is New Thought? And I've been studying New Thought for 40 years. I can always know that because that's how long Beck and I have been together, 40 years. And we kind of found each other, kind of wandering in the world, and we needed a lot of support from someplace. And the religions that we were going to wasn't giving us what we needed. So we needed a new path to go with Kim's shirt. We wanted to find a new path. And New Thought became our new path. Today, I often ask people who do not come here, what is New Thought? And I'm going to read some of my answers, which we've got up here. I often hear it's woo-woo. I don't even know what woo-woo is, but it's woo-woo. Then I often hear, and this is like, New Thought people do not like to be associated with this, it's Scientology. It's the church Tom Cruise goes to. It's not. I say, no, it's not Scientology. I don't know anything about Scientology, but it's not. Deepak Chopra teaches it. Yes, he does. It's about crystals and rocks. Not really. New Thought is more about spirituality and thought than items. Nothing wrong with rocks. It's just what we would almost call New Age. So there is a distinction there. New Age, New Thought, if you care. Joel Osteen teaches it. Absolutely. I tape him every Sunday. He always has good jokes to start. And he gives a lot of good New Thought lessons. And he has the largest Protestant church in North America. And as you know, he's like a multi-millionaire. So things are going really well with Joel teaching New Thought. And again, Tom Cruise, we all know about Tom Cruise. He goes to Scientology. So I don't know anything about Scientology, but I do know about the New Thought people. I know Oprah Winfrey is always teaching New Thought. I don't think she uses that word. Michael Beckwith is her guru. Michael Beckwith runs the Agape Spiritual Center out west, and it's just huge, big, big, big. Michael Beckwith is extraordinarily popular and a wonderful speaker and author, and he has a big congregation. So now let's do some history. New Thought is a term used to describe an American movement that began in the 1800s. Now, I could tell you a few things, and we could just go to our potluck. So the few things I could tell you is, New Thought is you create your life by your thoughts. You create your life by your thoughts. We are all one, and there's a spirit in all of us. That's it. Now, I'm going to talk for 14 more minutes, but that's it, okay? And because, I don't know if you know this about me, but my first career, do you know what my first career was? No. I tell people a lot about myself in these talks. I failed the 4th grade, so I always tell people that. 4th grade I failed, so most of my stories go back to the 4th grade. And then I got an awakening and kind of started studying and did go to college. And my first job was a 7th grade history teacher. So I'm back at it again, you know, I know. I loved it, I really did love it, but I left for other reasons, and that's another talk. Okay, the first thing to know about New Thought is that it is not new. They should not have named it New Thought. If they had asked me in the 1800s, I would have said, name it Ancient Wisdom. And then everybody would be clear. It's ancient wisdom, it's not New Thought. New Thought has grown into thousands of little movements in the past 150 years as many fellowships have sprung up. The 2 largest fellowships under the New Thought congregations would be Unity, that's us, and then this one that has 16 different names. It's very confusing, so I'll try to explain it. But today its name is, oh, that should be an L, it's a typo. It's the Center for Spiritual Living. The Center for Spiritual Awareness is my coffee cup, right, Kathleen?
Right.
The Center for Spiritual Awareness, CSA, is up here in Tiger, Roy Davison's organization. Well, I got that confused. But this is CSL, it used to be called Religious Science or Science of Mind. We'll talk more about that later. And of course, you know about the size of Unity. I want to do some history. Since I was a history teacher, let's do some history. So let's pull up Phineas. Kim, terrific. We practiced last night. Last time I had a call from help from the audience and he didn't work, so we practiced. This is Phineas Quimby. Anybody heard of him? Okay, they called him, he has a long name, but his nickname was Park. Phineas Quimby was a watch and clock maker in New England, and he suffered from tuberculosis. Again, 1800s, you know, people had lots of diseases that we certainly don't have today. I've studied him a little bit, and when he went to the medical people, they gave him something to cure himself. They gave him mercury. It's hard to believe now, but that was good science in the 1800s. They gave him mercury. The mercury rotted his teeth and made him sick. So he said to himself, I probably need to look into some other methods. Who wouldn't? So he began to experiment with ways to cure himself using his mind. We don't know how Phineas Quimby cured his tuberculosis, but we know he did cure himself, and it was not through medical, it was not through doctors of the time. So in 1836, we're going to bring up another character from the past, Antoine Mesmer. Mesmer, the term mesmerize, Mesmer is really the inventor of hypnosis. Mesmer was in Austria. Mr. Mesmer was running around healing people by putting them in a trance, working with their minds, and putting magnets on them. And people, he was professed to be a healer. So that's Antoine. Now what happened is Mr. Quimby was introduced, so this is the order here, he's older. Mr. Quimby was introduced to his teaching by somebody who was traveling around in New England at the time, because Quimby was from New England. So he learned about Mesmer, and he got like, oh, this is it. So he quit his job as a clockmaker, and he started going around being a faith healer. Again, the faith healing that Mesmer did was to unclog the fluid, because Mesmer thought there was a fluid in you that was making you sick. So that's why the magnets. So Quimby started teaching magnets and putting people somewhat into an hypnotic state. Now, Quimby is called the father of New Thought because of the 2 discoveries he made. His first discovery was that when he forgot the magnets, the people still got healed. Well, I guess he left the magnets in the horse and buggy, but the people still got healed. So that means it must have something to do with the brain, the mind. That was his first discovery. And the second discovery that Quimby made is he would do his thought process for people, his prayer, and they didn't have to be in the room to get healed. So he thought, oh my, that's interesting. They're healing even though I'm praying for them and they're not in the room. Oh, we're all connected. So it's obvious why he would be the father of New Thought. He's teaching us about the mind, and he's teaching us that we're all connected. Now, this is where it gets really confusing. This talk took me a while to write because there's a lot of characters going on here. I've heard this talk a couple times. Even though I've heard it, I never really understood it. So now I know it now because I've been studying it all week. Hopefully you'll learn it. It's confusing now because somebody who was Mr. Quimby's student, who learned about the thought process and got healed, that person went off and started her own church. And he had a lot of names for his teaching. He didn't have a church. He was a traveling spiritual healer. He did have one name for his church. I'll give you a hint. Christian Science. Who was his student? Mary Baker Eddy. Mary Baker Eddy was his student, left him, went off, started her own thing, started Christian Science, which is not considered New Thought. The Christian Science religion, as many of you may know, believe in total prayer for healing, and that believe that your bad thoughts is what caused your illness. Mary Baker Eddy said, just pray. And Mary Baker Eddy was very, very popular. She lived from 1821 to 1910. In the 1820s, I think you'd probably be better off going to Mary Baker Eddy than some of the doctors. At least, you know what I'm saying? She was praying with you and giving you hope. And the medicine just wasn't there in the 1800s. So you can understand where all this faith healing. You hear that mind cure. You hear New Thought started with mind cure because they were looking for ways to cure. So I don't know if Mesner was sick. I don't know enough about Mesner, but Quimby was ill. Mary Baker Eddy was ill. Okay? So now we're going to introduce you to some more. But here's where the relationships get confusing. Mary, handout.
Yes, ma'am.
Mary's my handout. Okay, let's go to the picture, please. Mary is giving you this slide because by the end of our, in the next 12 minutes, you're going to understand who all these people are. And these are the people that have influenced New Thought today. So we're going to start with Mary Baker Eddy. Mary Baker Eddy studied under Quimby. She was very popular. However, as the years went on and into the 1900s, how many of you know Christian Science? Have heard of Christian Science? Yeah, okay. I mean, it's been popular for many, many years. But as we've come into modern medicine, it has certainly decreased, and their churches are not as large. There are still people that do practice Christian Science, but they're more of a limited now. They'll go to the doctor if there's a broken bone. They'll go to the doctor if there's an infection. So let's say they've modified their teaching, but they're certainly not as popular. So we've got the flyer. We've talked about Quimby. So on this slide, we've got the same slide. You see Mesner influenced Quimby. Quimby taught Eddy. Eddy went over here to Christian Science. Now where it gets really fascinating is that Emma Curtis Hopkins is called the mother of New Thought. Not because she married Quimby, but because she made a lot happen. So I'm now going to talk about Emma Curtis Hopkins. You have the slide, and we're going to move to the next slide to talk about Emma Curtis Hopkins. Here's Emma Curtis Hopkins. Emma Curtis Hopkins was sick. She had a problem with breathing. Emma Curtis Hopkins went to Christian Science. Emma Curtis Hopkins was a New Englander. She went to Christian Science. She became a big follower of Baker. She moved to Boston to study with Eddy, Mary Baker Eddy. Everybody has three names. So Hopkins, Mrs. Hopkins, goes and studies with Mary Baker Eddy. And she's writing the journals, and she's an editor, and so she's a big deal in Christian Science. They have a disagreement. Their disagreement was Mary Baker Eddy thought she was the sole host of the wellness, the knowledge, everything. She believed it all resided in her. She was the only one who knew the truth. Hopkins didn't believe that. Hopkins said everybody knows the truth. So Hopkins broke with Mary Baker Eddy. Some people say Eddy fired her. Some people say Hopkins left. I don't know, but Hopkins left and moved to the Middle West. what Hopkins did, she left Christian Science to develop her own teaching, her own metaphysical teaching, and she set up a seminary in Chicago. Are you with me? Okay. So it was Hopkins in 1886 who formally organized the New Thought movement. So she took all this input from all these other people that were influenced by all these other people, ancient wisdom, and she started this New Thought seminary. And she started training people. Now, I love this lady, this Hopkins. Hopkins was divorced. Mary Baker Eddy was married 3 times. I mean, these women were feminists. Hopkins, apparently her husband, her only son died when he was 30, and her husband deserted her. She was extraordinary. They called her a mystic. So based on her studies, Hopkins taught that we do not need a being in the sky looking down on us and judging us. Sounds like us. We don't need a being. We are the divine. Hopkins taught that God exists within our consciousness, within our minds. Thus, we don't need clergymen. We don't need a savior to achieve the oneness within us. Let's go over that again. 1880s, divorced woman, moves from East Coast to Chicago, develops this huge following, and this woman is teaching that. And this is totally revolutionary. This is against the Protestants of our nation at that time. So that brings me to who studied with Hopkins. Next slide. Oh, this is working. Woo, Kim, you're good. Who studied with Hopkins are the Fillmores. So the Fillmores went to a lecture by somebody called Dr. Weeks. Dr. Weeks was a student of Hopkins. Who got cured? Myrtle Fillmore. Myrtle Fillmore was sick. She went to a healing ministry. She got hooked on it. She decided to get really engaged. She's the first one that got engaged. Charles had a business. He was selling real estate. So Mildred was the one who pulled him in. So all of a sudden now, they're going to Chicago and they're getting trained and they're graduating from this metaphysical church of Hopkins. So that takes care of Charles Fillmore. Now I'm going to introduce you to a new gentleman. This is Ernest Holmes. Ernest Holmes founded Religious Science. And they were both advocates and ardent students of, hit it, Emerson. Now, a couple weeks ago I talked about Emerson, and I explained how influential he is on New Thought. Emerson is also from New England, and he's running around telling everybody, you don't need to be praying to one God and believing in heaven and hell. He got expelled from Harvard for his Harvard divinity talk that said that to the Harvard theologians. They kicked him out of Harvard for a long time. They did invite him back in his later years. But he was bringing this new thought too. So both Holmes and the Fillmores loved Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson was his name. Charles Fillmore named his son Waldo. And he liberally took Emerson's teachings. Emerson wrote his essays. Emerson was not a minister. He started out as a minister, but he stopped. And he just went around and made his money writing books and writing essays and lecturing. And Ernest Holmes found his book. And Ernest Holmes started reading Emerson and fell in love with Emerson. So a lot of the Church of Religious Science, or Centers for Spiritual Living, come from the teaching of Emerson. And Emerson, and Kathleen and I were talking about this before the meeting, Emerson studied the Vedas. You know what the Vedas are? In Hinduism, they're the most ancient readings. They were not interpreted into English until the early 1900s, and Emerson read that. So it's this whole universe of us coming together to be where we are today. Okay, I gotta speed it up. Move on, please. This is what Ernest Holmes teaches. Through the power of our mind, we're continually creating our ideas and our conditions of life. Mr. Holmes moved, he started in New England, and he went to California. And he started his church. He didn't start as a church, but he started his teaching in California. Neither Holmes nor Fillmore wanted to start a church. They wanted spiritual centers. They didn't want to start a church, but their members said, hey, let's get organized, let's have a church. Ernest Holmes, a little bit about him. He grew up, as I said, he grew up poor. He grew up in Maine. He was raised Baptist. He was always questioning. His nickname as a kid was Question Mark. He found Emerson. He fell in love with Emerson, and he said, man, this is the way to go. Holmes was influenced by Mary Baker Eddy. He was influenced by Hopkins, because as you can see, Hopkins taught Emerson. And Emerson was Hopkins' last student. Not Emerson. Holmes was her last student. She died in 25. He was her student in 1924. And he writes that she was a stately woman. She always had a hat. She wore gloves. She was just a powerhouse, even in her older years. So here we come full circle to the New Thought people, and to unity being like Christian science, and unity being like religious science because of these relationships. So what's the next slide, Kim? The differences. Unity, this is just from my perspective. I've studied both with religious science, which started with this textbook. This is Ernest Holmes' textbook. So religious science started with his textbook. This is his teachings. And I'm in Unity as well. When I lived in Atlanta, I would go to both churches. I would go to the Unity Church and what they call now Centers for Spiritual Living. I would go to both. But I studied more under these and spent a lot of time going to classes. They have terrific classes in the Atlanta centers. Unity's larger. It has 600 centers in North America. Centers for Spiritual Living has 400. Unity started in Missouri. It started as spiritual healing. Centers for Spiritual Living started in California. As I said, he was a lecturer. Unity started as a silent Unity, was a prayer minister. That's ministry. It's still there. You can call right now and somebody will answer the phone. 1-800-NOW-PRAY. I feel like a car salesman. You can call any time of the day. 1-800-NOW-PRAY. You can get somebody to talk to you live. So I've called them. They're lovely. The church was, they believe in affirmative prayer, and Centers for Spiritual Living have a little different way of praying, which I'll talk about at the end. I want to get you guys involved in the conversation. And we're going to get you involved right now, but I did promise you that I would tell you what I would bring to show and tell. And I'm going to bring them right now. This is what I would bring to show and tell. 4th grade. Why would I bring these? I would bring a pair of shoes. Why a pair of shoes? Because the great comedian George Carlin said, religion is like a pair of shoes. Find one that fits you and don't make me wear your shoes. The end. Very good. Your turn. Questions? Very good. And we don't have too much time, but we have a little, and then we can talk at lunch. I'm not going to make a stay. It's a couple minutes to 11. I was interested if anybody wanted to share how you found New Thought and what it has taught you and how you practice it. Cannot remember. Go ahead, Charles.
When I got divorced, I felt kind of lost, and I couldn't find there was a void that I couldn't fill.